Hello everybody and welcome to Raising Vibrations. You're with Simon today. And today's video is going to be on Chiron. And I'm really excited to be sharing the knowledge of Chiron with everybody today in this video. I'm also really excited to share that this idea was suggested by one of our Patreon members, Elida. And I think it was a really fantastic idea, considering the fact that the Sun is actually conjunct Chiron in Pisces as we're recording this. And I'm sure that on some level, we're all deeply resonating with a Chiron story within our lives. And so thank you very much, Elida, for suggesting this to us. And this is the idea for this month. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually have a look at what we're talking about when we're talking about the asteroid Chiron in our astrology charts. I know that many of us have searched the internet and we're looking for its symbolic meaning. We've probably watched some of the older videos that I've created as well, and some of the others that are on the YouTube. And a big part of this this understanding is something that I think is really healthy for us, considering that I think that Chiron has not been in our conscious awareness for a long period of time. And I think that Chiron has a very huge impact on the way that we as human beings are growing spiritually within our lives and awakening to experiences that cannot be described by our, sort of physical senses, that there must be something deeper. And, how do we access this sort of transpersonal realm within our lives? So I definitely think that Chiron is very potent in our astrology charts, and I'm also not surprised that so many of us are really wanting to digest this material. So with that being said, here's my way of really trying to capture the essence of Chiron so that we can embody its energy within our lives and really see it within our lives as well. So as you can see on my first slide over here, you can see it's called Awakening Individuality. And to me, I feel that this is a very potent set of words that reflects the nature of Chiron, because, our individuality is something that reflects to us our own process of evolution within ourselves. It is our unique path. It is something that reflects to us that each of us within this story of human beingness has an individual experience, and how do we relate to that individual experience? How do we share our individual experiences? How do we understand our individual experiences? And I think a big part of that is what Chiron offers us in terms of connection to awakening that individuality, connection to connecting to the essence of what that story is about. So let's have a look over here. So the basic outline of our discussion today is going to be pretty much exploring Saturn. This is something that's key to understanding Chiron, and I'll go into that for us all. We're going to be exploring the nature of Uranus. Again, Uranus plays a very big role in Chiron's process, and of course how we actually recognize these patterns. We'll go deeply into the nature of understanding Chiron, and we'll recognize the types of ways that Chiron plays out from a perspective or point of view where it's distraction, okay, where we are in distraction, and where we are awakening our individuality. So this is something that's really interesting about how I've reflected on Chiron and its process within our consciousness. So we'll explore those as well. And then part of this experience is also Chiron through the houses. And I'm going to be offering that on my Patreon. So if you would like to learn more about what Chiron means through your house, in the description below, there will be a link, as well as in the comments, to go check out our Patreon page. And this is available to all of our members. So if you would like to learn more about your Chiron through houses, just choose one of the memberships. And also I'm offering a 20% discount on all Chiron readings if you become a member with our Patreon page as well. So if you'd like to know more about that dynamic, I'll actually go through that later on when we finish this video. Okay, so let's jump straight into this, right? Let's understand the Saturn realm within the context of Uranus. My question is, why Saturn? Okay. Well, when you're trying to understand our spiritual journey, we have to acknowledge that there is a physical realm in which we are existing within. And I think that it's actually pretty easy to notice that in our earthly existence, a majority of human beings get trapped in the sense that there isn't anything beyond this physical realm, and that accessing forms of astrology, accessing forms of phenomena that can't be described using, say, for instance, mainstream science, there's a trap. And that trap is that Saturn plays out this role of the physical realm, and that nothing beyond that realm exists. And so it's very limited in its perception because it's finite. Saturn is the realm of finite. It means everything that is existing right now in this moment over here, but not presence, not awareness of the totality. It is simply what your eyes and your ears and your fingernails and hands, etc., and nose, and what your mouth can taste. It's the very physical essence of this experience, and of course it's all material in that way. So Saturn is our physical sensational reality that connects us to the metaphysical, and the metaphysical connects to the physical through this realm of Saturn. So we can use words like the ego, our personality, the name that we have given, the identity structure that allows us to interact with this physical realm, okay? And so this is what the Saturn realm is about. It is time. It is our limited perception of reality through our boundaries in consciousness. So naturally speaking, when we are connected to this physical world, our perception of reality is limited by our physical senses, right? The five in that sense, not the sixth sense, but the fifth. So when we look at Saturn in the astrology chart, what we are looking at is the physical boundaries and limitations that the soul has created for itself, the conditioning, the shell, as it were, the boundaries, the societal structures, the conditioning that parents provided you with when you were young. And so it reflects this part of us that has to do with how we connect our personality and our emotional dynamics, so the emotional reality that we feel and sense, to the physical realm. Okay, so when you look at this picture over here, it's called Karmic Archaeology. And look very closely at this picture and notice that there are rings upon rings upon rings upon rings, and over a period of time you can actually start to see this thing called layering. And within the core of this is this human existence of innocence and softness and vulnerability and something that needs to be protected and nurtured. And yet at the same time, it's also the ripples of each experience that we can have in a day. We can perceive it as the womb. We can perceive it as the seed that is within the context of our the seed that's in the ground. It's about to be born. So this picture really captures the essence of Saturn from the context of deep spiritual understanding, is that it's our karmic archaeology. It's the history of our karmic patterns that is held within the context of Saturn, because Saturn is always finite and reflecting the past. So what has come before? So when we access Saturn from the point of view of understanding Chiron, we're looking at the physical realm of existence and the emotional dynamics that have existed within that context. So what Saturn does within this process is that when we are awakening our Chiron stories in our lives, when we are awakening the Chiron asteroid meaning, what we are learning here is to understand that each of us has an inherent conflict within ourselves, right? Chiron carries this essence of woundedness that we can see all over the internet, that Chiron is the wounded healer. On some level, there must be some truth to the nature of why this was the case. And when you go and read into the mythology of Chiron itself, it reflects this part in which there was a wound that occurred. And what I find really interesting about this is that when you connect the Saturn Realm to the story of Chiron, and you observe the logo of Chiron, the symbolic representation of Chiron, Chiron is half man and half animal, half centaur. And what's so fascinating about this is that where those two meet, where the man and the animal meet, that fusing is where conflict within ourselves exists, because we have true conflict is within. And if you ever look at that picture over there, you can see that there's this shell that represents the crystallization of definition, the crystallization of how we have identified our experiences in the past, and what those and how those are being crystallized within our emotional self. That is the karmic archaeology. That is the multiple layers of experiences that we've had in our lives that we have needed to process through. And so part of this process of the Saturn realm within this context is that we're all trying to merge this physical realm with something that has deeper meaning. And yet part of that experience is limited in perception. So what Chiron does is that, or should I say Saturn, what Saturn does is Saturn represents this limitation through duality. So when we're in the physical form, we have two eyes. And this duality within our eyes represents opposition, represents something outside of ourselves. And once we live within that dualistic realm, we can get caught up in events happening to us and becoming, in a sense, wounded by these experiences that are separated, i.e. that we are in duality. We are seeing it separate from our inner spiritual journey. So when we're locked within the Saturn realm in our charts, we develop emotional experiences, and due to the darkness, due to the limited light, the limitedness within the context of expanding our awareness deeper into why this could be occurring, we naturally create and experience the woundedness within ourselves. The woundedness is the inability to process it, which creates that true conflict that is inherent within. We're wanting to break out of the shell. We're wanting to break out of the mold. And each of us carries this. Each of us carries this sensitivity of wanting to find liberation from something emotionally. And yet every time we want to go do that, we have to go through these Chiron stories. This picture that you're seeing over here is a cave that Luke Skywalker goes to in the second Star Wars film, and he meets Yoda over there. And what I find really fascinating about this cave is that not necessarily the story specifically, but Chiron stories either lead us to great understanding of, or great fear, or great insight into ourselves. And this cave is where the darkness that is held within Saturn is what we must enter. We must enter our darkness. We must go into that process. And what happens when we go into that darkness is that we bring with us the fear of what we perceive is going to occur. And when Luke Skywalker goes into this cave, he manifests his father. He also enters the cave with the conversation with Yoda saying, you know, is this going to be safe? What should I go in with? And Yoda says, leave your weapons behind, but you go in with what you have. And he goes in thinking, whatever you take with you is what he says. And because it's dark, because it's unknown, because it's it's something that kind of explored, he takes with weaponry. And this is something that's so beautiful about the story of the Chiron experience, that every time we enter darkness, we bring fear with it, which makes us make decisions based on attacking, or a sense of we've got to be prepared, but yet in an aggressive way. And so what happens is that Luke Skywalker goes in there and he manifests his father and he attacks him. And when I was doing research for this, I was reading about the dynamics of the different multiple theories that exist with this specific event. And one of the people that was talking was saying that they were trying to show that that Yoda saying, "Don't take your weaponry," was surrender into the process, that the very cave itself manifests our fear. And Chiron, when we are looking through Saturn, is where we're going to manifest our fear of duality. And when we get stuck within that process, we continue to replenish the true conflict that's inherently within, based on our karmic archaeology of woundedness and darkness that we've been able to process because of the limitedness in our awareness. So when we observe Chiron in our charts, Chiron reflects the bridge between Saturn and Uranus. And what Chiron is trying to reveal to us is that there's this sensitivity, there's this emotional dynamic that we must enter. And the entering can be done through the Saturn realm of limitation, or it can be done through the process of the Uranian realm. Now, the Uranian realm in itself is where liberation exists. It is where we are invited to observe the experiences and observe the dynamics in our lives where deconditioning can take place, which of course requires us to enter the cave, as it were, the darkness, in a state of surrender, in a state of allowing ourselves to recognize and merge with the pain, merge with the experience of limitedness. I merge with the human experience, merge with the suffering, merge with the sadness, merge with the unconsciousness that is held within the darkness of our own essence, that the unknowingness in itself is inviting us to see how the soul has already set up the counterpart to Saturn, which is Uranus. And when you read about the stories of Uranus and Saturn, they don't like each other, but yet are absolutely necessary within the process of spiritual awakening. Because Uranus is needed to fracture and decondition and break apart the mold that Saturn has created at one point, where it was necessary, but yet limiting. So the Uranian energy within the context of the astrology chart is this long-term storage of cellular memory. So you know how we talked about Saturn being this emotional archaeology? Well, the Uranian realm is this subconscious state of awareness that is unconscious, that is in our psyche, buried within ourselves, that only gets activated through psychological, through things like dreams as an example, or through hypnosis or past life regression or spontaneous awakening experiences, where the archetypal stories that are within our subconscious bleed through into our physical awareness. And when they bleed through into our physical awareness, how do we conceptualize it? How do we put it into a bracket from Saturn's realm and say, this is when it's happening? We can't. So what happens to us, we find we're unable to identify its time. And because we can not identify its time straight away, it becomes something that is fracturing. So the Uranian energy within our chart reflects to us this long-term storage. It's like the hard drive of all of the events that have occurred to us individually, but it also reflects to us where there has been an experience in our lives that we have been unable to process, which then gets repressed into the subconscious, that over lifetimes will come to the surface in order to be resolved. And so when we have Uranian transits, it's not a surprise that we have, like I said, like a flashback, an emotional flashback, a trauma cycle. Post-traumatic stress is something that is deeply connected with the Uranian energy, because it's the stress of the event at the time that wasn't able to be processed and emotionally released that then becomes this long-term memory or cellular memory of the soul. So now when we access this Uranian realm and we relink it with Chiron, Chiron is now bridging the subconscious to the conscious through direct experience, and this is where the healing takes place. Because when we're able to bridge these two together, we're able to awaken deeper realms within ourselves. And so what happens here is that we do this, we have a shift in perspective. So I invite everybody at the moment to actually, what do you see? What do you see in this picture? So if you would like to spend some time more trying to figure this out, just press the pause button. Otherwise, I'm going to continue. So if you have a look at this picture over here, you can actually see on one side, it's a duck. And then on the other side, it's actually a bunny with its ears. So to the right, it's the bunny, and to the left, it's the duck. And this is what Uranus does for us. It creates paradigm shifts. It allows for us to shift our perspective when these experiences happening to us. And so what happens is it fractures the emotional crystallization of repression that took place to us when we couldn't process it, and it allows us to see it from a different point of view as we process through it. And then when we process through it, we can actually find this liberation. And so Uranus is the liberator that leads to deeper cycles of empathy and self-understanding, and it's a part of an inward journey. So we have to go inward, right, into the subconscious. So the subconscious comes to the surface, and then as we process it through, we release it through, and it creates deeper connections to ourselves. And this is why this picture over here is just so beautiful. This is the eye. And you can look at this eye over here and notice that in the center is the existence of our beingness. And the millions of fibers that are coming out of that over there, that are all reflecting non-linearness. Healing is about recognizing that the soul is manifesting multiple lifetimes, multiple realities, and that Uranus in itself correlates to the awakening of different experiences in different timelines that cannot be understood from the perspective of the mind, from the perspective of the ego, because we only have this moment right now, and we can only process this thing right now. And yet from the Uranian field, i.e. the long-term storage memory, we have these multiple lives running. So you can look at an astrology chart and see, here's where prior life memories of post-traumatic stress have occurred relative to the Saturn repression. And when you look at the two in the chart, you actually start to notice this theme of personalities that have been developed relative to where your Uranus and Saturn is. And this is, of course, where the astrology comes in and helps you process these things. Hence the reason why I'm doing this this recording with us, because when we awaken to this potential in the chart, when we awaken to understanding this as a way of recognizing the process of human experience and why we manifest a physical form to experience multiple realities to process through to heal ourselves, it's about healing duality. It's about bringing us back to the realization that the separateness is what allows us to not see the transpersonalness that is us. So this picture of the eye reflects the multiple stories, and we're healing these multiple stories. And what happens is, when Chiron's involved, it allows us to access these multiple stories that when it becomes healed in this moment, it affects other parallel realities that we're existing within as well. It changes the fabric of time. It is literally bringing back whatever was once in existence into the form to be processed through, to change that dynamic. And then, of course, we change and alter the ancestral karma, the ancestral healing. There's just so much in that process. So what is Chiron's purpose? I have shared this with you over here a lot, but if you observe this picture over here, I chose it specifically because Chiron is a path that we walk that is shrouded by darkness, and yet at the same time is also deeply, deeply illuminating, because the darkness comes from the duality and the pain and the separation. And yet when we adventure into it with courage and understanding and surrender, we open up a pathway to ourselves that's so unique to us, that is our individual story, that becomes the healing that we can then share with the rest because it's our unique personal experience. It's trademarked almost. It's patented by our own directness. So this path may seem shrouded and covered by the trees there, but yet at the same time is unique to us. We get to walk it. So Chiron's purpose is the gateway between our personality and awakening our spirituality, and the sensitivity that exists between the two, and how there is a need for sensitivity regarding that. Chiron is about this process of deeply nourishing the inner and outer self, the as above, so below, the roots of our inner connectedness within our physical form, and the aspirations and dreams and visions of higher consciousness and awareness, as shown by this tree. And then the picture of the Ouroboros that is around that, and that cycle of life in which we incarnate to awaken deeper experiences, and then we incarnate in deeper experiences. And it's this process of just consistently cycling through this until we reach a state of returning back to the source, returning back to the place. And it's this process. And Chiron awakens this intimate process of connecting physical realms to the non-physical, like I said, with the tree, and nourishing the connection between the two. And what materializes out of that is this beautiful picture of Saturn and Chiron's orbit, just outside Saturn, but notice how it touches Saturn, and then Uranus's orbit. And notice how Chiron is beautifully wedged between Saturn and Uranus's orbit. And notice how Chiron touches Uranus, and then it accesses the Uranian field and then comes back into the Saturn field, and then accesses the Uranian field and then comes back into the Saturn field. And that's how that process of our individual story materializes. And so we are invited into the deeper awakening experience of bridging our egos and surrendering the personality traits, the definitions, the structures that we define ourselves through, and awakening experiences that are transpersonal. And Chiron's process is surrendering that through direct experience. That's why it's the woundedness, because it's our direct experience of the event that we couldn't process, that now becomes our emotional archaeology, that eventually becomes buried within our subconscious. Then at some point in time, when Chiron hits Uranus again, it's going to bring it up to the surface and say, okay, this was a wound that happened over here. It's cellular memory. It's part of something that is deeply activated in your path, that when you become conscious of it and you explore it within yourself, it brings light to that shadow. It brings light to the separation. So where Chiron sits in our chart, we see the separation relative to Saturn. And then where Chiron sits in our chart also reveals our deep potential to awaken empathy and self-compassion and the reuniting of source, i.e. love, through Uranus's fracturing and liberation cycle. So all of these three are beautifully interconnected. And this is the process of bridging the gap, or bridging not the gap, pardon me, but bridging the rainbow bridge, as Barbara Hand-Clow reflects to us in our chart. So with that being said, that's the end of the video over there, guys, regarding Chiron through the cycle and what it means for us. I hope that it inspired your understanding regarding this material, and that you got a lot out of this. And for any of you that are wanting to learn more about this in your astrology chart, that you want to, I'll do the reading for you in that sense. I have a special offer, 20% discount on Chiron readings. And if you go over to my Patreon page, which there is a link in the description as well as the comments below, and you sign up to any membership, that discount is available. And also in the membership as well, I've got Chiron Through the Houses video. So if you want to come and check out what Chiron Through the Houses looks for you, again, come over to our Patreon page, okay? All right, everybody, thank you so much for listening and for your attention. I deeply appreciate your support. And once again, I'd like to say thank you so much for the suggestion from Alida, for giving us this opportunity to explore Chiron. I really hope that you enjoyed this. And thank you so much for everybody for listening. Have a wonderful evening. Take care. Bye-bye.